We are live. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's program, It's a Bird, It's a Plane, honoring the creators of Superman, a virtual ceremony celebrating Jewish Americans Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, hosted by the Jewish American Hall of Fame in partnership with the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, a nonpartisan global grassroots coalition of more than 375 interfaith NGOs and 355,000 individuals uniting to implement creative solutions to combat hate. We are live on Zoom and Facebook and are proud to present the Jewish American Hall of Fame's 2021 inductees, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the late creators of Superman, the first comic book superhero. During today's unique program, we have the opportunity to learn about Siegel and Shuster's life stories and their contributions to American culture. My name is Arthur Masarjan, and I serve as the new Deputy Director of the Jewish American Hall of Fame, and also the Director of Strategic Content and International Affairs for the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement. The FBI's recent annual hate crimes data found that despite representing only 2% of the US population, American Jews are the victims of nearly 60% of all religiously motivated hate crimes in the country. And a new American Jewish Committee survey found that 40% of American Jews changed their behavior over the past year, spurred by fears of anti-Semitism, with 90% believing that anti-Semitism is a problem in the US today, and 82% believing it has gotten worse in the last 5 years. As the world's oldest hatred is on the rise again, the Jewish American Hall of Fame's critically important mission of celebrating the contributions of Jewish Americans to American society is more important than ever before. Now, to open today's ceremony, I would like to introduce Mel Wacks, the director of the Jewish American Hall of Fame. Mel Wacks founded the Jewish American Hall of Fame at the Magnus Museum in Berkeley in 1969. The goals of the project were twofold: to raise funds for the Magnus Museum and to raise awareness for Jews and non-Jews alike of the substantial contributions made to America and the world by American Jews. Mel accomplished these goals by raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Magnus Museum, the American Jewish Historical Society, and the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati. In addition, Mel has created an award-winning website, written a book about the Jewish American Hall of Fame medals, and arranged for the Jewish American Hall of Fame plaques to be displayed at the Virginia Holocaust Museum and the Jewish American Hall of Fame medals exhibit at the Skirball Museum. Mel, thank you for leading today's program. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm very pleased they have recently joined the Jewish American Hall of Fame as Deputy Director. After 52 years, it's nice to have some help. The Jewish American Hall of Fame was born in 1969 with the help of Seymour Fromer, founder of the Judah L. Magnus Museum in Berkeley, California. In 2001, with the assistance of Dr. Michael Feldberg, the Jewish American Hall of Fame became a division of the American Jewish Historical Society. I'm happy to say that millions of people have read about the achievements of our inductees in publications ranging from the New York Times to the Medals magazine published by the British Museum. Hundreds of thousands of people from around the world have visited our award-winning website, amuseum.org, have seen the permanent display of Jewish American Hall of Fame plaques at the Virginia Holocaust Museum, and our medals in the collection of the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati. You will hear more about these exhibits later. Over 25,000 Jewish American Hall of Fame medals have been sold, raising over $250,000 for the Magnus Museum, the American Jewish Historical Society, the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati, and other nonprofits. Today, we are here to celebrate the creators of Superman, artist Joe Shuster and writer Jerry Siegel. Superman fought for truth, justice, and the American way, and I like to think so does the Jewish American Hall of Fame. Here give you an idea of our past, how come this is. We have various categories. Here we have science. In 1905, Albert Einstein published 4 scientific papers that helped found modern physics and changed views on space, time, and matter. Their photoelectric effect, for which he won the Nobel Prize just 100 years ago in 1921, Brownian motion, special relativity, and matter-energy equivalence, or E equals MC squared. On the right is Judith Resnick, who was a pioneer for women entering NASA's space program and only the second American woman astronaut to travel in space. NASA's Challenger, flight F-51L, was Dr. Resnick's second space launch. She was to have assisted in photographing Halley's Comet. Tragically, 73 seconds into the flight, the space shuttle exploded in midair, and Judith Resnick died in one of the worst space disasters in history. Medicine. These are just selections, by the way. To see all of our honorees, please go to our website. There are over 50. Jonas Salk developed a vaccine that became the first weapon against the polio scourge. In the years immediately before mass inoculations with this Salk vaccine, there was an average of 25,000 cases a year in the United States. In 1969, not a single death from polio was reported in the nation, and the disease has virtually been eradicated worldwide. Now, you may not know about Gertrude Elia, but her exceptional accomplishments over the course of her long career as a chemist include the development of the first chemotherapy for childhood leukemia, the immune suppressant that made organ transplants possible, the first effective antiviral medication, and treatments for lupus, hepatitis, arthritis, gout, and other diseases. Elan stated, "It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit." Sports. By the way, there are over a dozen Jewish American Hall of Fames around the country. They all deal with sports. We deal with everything. After Hank Greenberg declined to play in an important baseball game on Yom Kippur in 1934, Edgar Guest published a poem, the last lines of which are, "We shall miss him on the infield and shall miss him at the bat, but he's true to his religion and I honor him for that." As the first Jewish baseball star, Hank Greenberg had to handle racial slurs from fans and opponents alike. Bertie Tebbetts, a Detroit teammate of Greenberg's for 7 seasons, recalled that, quote, "There was nobody in the history of the game who took more abuse than Greenberg, unless it was Jackie Robinson," end quote. Hank barely missed Babe Ruth's fabled record of 60 home runs when he hit 58 in 1938. Barney Ross was the first boxer to hold 3 world titles at the same time, world lightweight and junior welterweight champion and world welterweight champion. Ross joined the United States Marine Corps and was sent to Guadalcanal in the South Pacific. One night, he single-handedly fought nearly 24 Japanese soldiers, killing them all by morning. Because of his heroism, Ross was awarded 2 Purple Hearts and America's 3rd highest military honor, the Silver Star. You get the idea. Here's some more. We have Louis Brandeis, the first Jewish Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the great Jewish Supreme Court Justice who just passed away. She received the Albert Chernin Award, given annually by the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. She said in part, "I am a judge, born, raised, and proud of being a Jew. The demand for justice runs through the entirety of the Jewish history and Jewish tradition. The National Women's Hall of Fame sums up Ginsburg's service on the Supreme Court as, quote, Justice Bader Ginsburg has become known for her scholarly, balanced opinions and forthright personal courage." In entertainment, we have Houdini, the great magician, Barbra Streisand, the great entertainer. Whoops. In music, we have George Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue and Broadway shows and so much more, and died very young. Isaac Stern, the classical violinist, whose efforts saved Carnegie Hall from destruction. In business, we have Levi Strauss, and his motto is "Everyone knows his first name," the motto of the company, because many of you may be wearing Levi's right now. Joseph Pulitzer, who made the Pulitzer Prizes possible. In the military, Jews were initially denied the distinction of serving in the militia because of the, quote, disinclination and unwillingness of fellow soldiers to be on guard with said nation, end quote. Instead, Jews were required to pay an insulting tax. Asser Levy, one of the first Jewish settlers in America, fought and worked and won the right to participate in the Citizens Guard in November 1655. On the right is Robert Rosie Rosenthal. His B-17 crew was dubbed Rosie's Riveters. They concluded their 25th mission, which completed his military service in 1944. But Rosie re-enlisted, saying, "I had to do what I could for as long as I was able." This was in spite of the fact that 15 missions was the average life of a bomber crew. Later, Rosenthal was made head of the 350th Squadron after the commanding officer was shot down. Intelligence officer Marvin Bowman found Rosenthal, quote, one of the greatest figures of the Air Force, a shy, modest, and patriotic gentleman of truly amazing courage and achievement. And my wife and I had the pleasure of meeting him in New York, and he was just a wonderful guy. And now we come to the men of the hour, Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. After developing the comic strip characters of Superman, Clark Kent, Lois Lane, etc., writer Joe Siegel and artist Jerry Shuster began a 6-year quest to find a publisher. Eventually, they sold their concept to DC Comics for $130. Superman began as one of several anthology features in the national periodical publications Action Comics #1. By the way, a copy of that comic book recently sold for over $3 million. The strip proved so popular that National launched Superman into his own self-titled comic book, the first for any superhero, premiering in the summer of 1939. By the way, Superman and I are the same age. And the rest is history. Without Superman, there probably would not have been Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, or any other superheroes to entertain us, our children, or our children's children. I invite you all to visit our website, amuseum.org, to learn about the Jewish American Hall of Fame. And now back to Arthur and our exciting program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. That was wonderful. Thank you for the important background and history of the Jewish American Hall of Fame and your passionate dedication to the organization over the last 50 years.
52.
52 years. Wow. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Don Boozer, the manager of the Literature Department, as well as coordinator of the Ohio Center for the Book at the Cleveland Public Library, located in Superman's hometown. The Cleveland Public Library is home to one of the largest collections of Superman materials in the country, featuring over 1,000 items. The library mounted a major Superman exhibit from May 2017 to March 2018 through its historic downtown building. The current permanent exhibit fills more than 10 exhibit cases in the main library, including original drawings and models of the new Jewish American Hall of Fame Shuster and Siegel plaque and medal. Don will speak about this collection, as well as Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's connection to Cleveland, the origin of the Man of Steel, and the creative team's lasting legacy in comics and the genre of superheroes. Welcome, Don.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of the ceremony today, so thank you very much for including me. Let me share my screen here. All right, there we go. All right, so we're gathered today to honor Jerome, Jerry Siegel, and Joseph Joe Shuster as they are inducted into the Jewish American Hall of Fame. The names of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, better known simply as the team of Siegel and Shuster, are inextricably linked in the history of comics. Both men were born in 1914, Jerry Siegel on October 17th in Cleveland, Ohio, Joe Shuster on July 10th in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Jerry Siegel's Jewish parents arrived in New York in 1900 while fleeing anti-Semitism in their homeland of Lithuania, which was, at the time, still controlled by Russia. The family name was originally Sigalovich, as shown here on Jerry's father's petition for naturalization. And we can see Jerome's name shown on the list of family members as well. Jerry's father, Michael, changed the family name to Siegel and, as shown on this US Census from 1930, was the proprietor of a gents furnishing shop, a tailor with his own clothing store. The Siegel family, Jerry, his mother and father, and siblings, had moved to the Jewish neighborhood of Glenville in Cleveland, Ohio in 1928. The census shows Jerome as 15 years old. Joe Shuster's parents were also Jewish immigrants. Joe's father, Julius, emigrated from Holland, his mother, Ida, from Ukraine, and they met and married in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Julius also changed the family name as well once in America from Shusterovich to Shuster, and Julius also owned a tailor shop by coincidence, like Jerry's father. Since the family struggled to make ends meet, Joe Shuster as a boy scrounged paper wherever he could find it to hone his budding artistic talent. His sister Jean is quoted as saying that she remembers her little brother, quote, drawing elaborate scenes on the walls of their Toronto home, unquote, when paper was scarce. Joe Shuster's family moved to Cleveland, Ohio when he was around 10 years old, and the 1930 census shows Joe as 15 years old, the same age as Jerome Siegel, and the two would soon meet and make history. Around age 16, Jerry and Joe met while attending Glenville High School, and the two struck up a friendship over their shared enjoyment of reading science fiction and adventure stories and watching movies. Jerry has said that, quote, when Joe and I first met, it was like the right chemicals coming together, unquote. We see Joe and Jerome as they appeared in their senior high school yearbook here. The two would contribute stories and artwork during high school for their school newspaper, including Siegel's popular Goober the Mighty stories and Shuster's award-winning entry in the Thanksgiving cartoon contest in November of 1933. However, they also teamed up outside of their school activities. The first appearance of the name Superman from the creative duo was in January 1933 in the story The Reign of the Superman, written by Siegel and illustrated by Shuster, that appeared in issue number 3 of their self-published fanzine, Science Fiction, The Advance Guard of Future Civilization. The Superman character would go through a number of changes until Jerry and Joe were satisfied that they really had something. An article from the December 7th, 1933 issue of their school newspaper, the Glenville Torch, mentions that Jerome and Joe are trying to have a cartoon nationally syndicated. And this, in fact, was around the time the pair was attempting to get Superman into publication. So Siegel and Shuster's Superman would see his first publication in the inaugural June 1938 issue of Action Comics. Joe Shuster's iconic artwork of Superman lifting the car above his head graced the cover. And in many ways, the publication of Action Comics #1 ushered in the golden age of comics, with Superman launching a whole genre of superheroes with superhuman powers and secret identities. But that was all in the future in 1938. Action Comics was published by National Allied Publications, which would become known as DC Comics. Siegel and Shuster were only in their early 20s when they made the fateful decision to sell their copyrights to Superman to the publisher for only $130, a decision that they would regret almost immediately. Throughout much of their career with DC, the dynamic duo of Siegel and Shuster was simply compensated $20 for each page they created. According to their contract, they were also to be paid 5% on all profits from all commercial exploitation beyond print, such as radio and film. Unfortunately, this promised 5% was often not paid to Siegel and Shuster, and DC Comics either hid sales figures from the pair or did not inform them of the growing merchandising that featured Superman. And this would set off the first in a series of 9 lawsuits over several decades, pitting Siegel, Shuster, and their families against DC Comics. From all evidence, Siegel and Shuster's time with DC Comics presents a complicated story of conflicting goals and aspirations. And in the mid-1940s, DC Comics even removed any credit line to Siegel and Shuster from any Superman-related material. When a Superman movie was being planned in the mid-1970s, a great deal of negative publicity for DC was stirred up by their treatment of the creators of the title character. As a result, DC's parent company, Warner Communications, reinstated a credit line for Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster that had been dropped for more than 30 years earlier. Siegel and Shuster were also granted a lifetime pension of $20,000 a year, later increased to $30,000 plus health benefits. The 1978 film included in the opening credits Superman, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. The first comics issue with the restored credit was Superman number 302, published in August of 1976. Credit was finally restored to where credit was due. Now, even though it took years to regain the credit where it was due, both men received multiple accolades and awards from colleagues and fans throughout their careers, including both being inducted into the Will Eisner Award Hall of Fame in 1992 and the Harvey Award's Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in 1993, and individually being honored for their contributions to comics. Shuster is also commemorated in the annual Joe Shuster Canadian Comic Book Creator Awards. And fans of Superman are worldwide, with memorabilia of all kinds associated with the Man of Steel popular to collect. Cleveland Public Library in downtown Cleveland, Ohio, was fortunate to acquire the collection of Mike Curtis in 2016 and to be able to share it with the public. Mr. Curtis is a writer and comics fan from Arkansas who also wrote for the Dick Tracy comic strip and spent more than 40 years gathering his collection. The collection features well over 1,000 items, some dating back to 1939, and includes comics, posters, toys, packaging, clothing, photographs, and other miscellaneous memorabilia. The library's Superman collection is augmented by additional materials, including papers associated with the various court cases that attempted to regain the well-deserved credit for Siegel and Shuster's creative effort, as well as various books and comics. Now, two gems of the Cleveland Public Library's Superman collection on display are Jerry Siegel's writing desk, donated to the library by his daughter, Laura Siegel Larson, who we are fortunate to have join us today. And the desk was used by the Man of Steel's co-creator from 1940 through 1948 at his house in University Heights to write scripts for Superman, the Spectre, Slam Bradley, the Star-Spangled Kid, and Robot Man. The other gem is the larger-than-life statue of Superman in flight by sculptor David Deming. The statue, a scale model for a 30-foot steel construction to be installed near the shores of Lake Erie, graces the lobby on the second floor of the main library. The most recent gems to be added to the collection are the medallions and original artwork graciously donated to the Cleveland Public Library by Mel Wacks of the Jewish American Hall of Fame and sculptor Eugene Daub. And I will say that we are also in the process of creating custom boxes and display items for these as well. So we'll be able to preserve them for perpetuity. Joe Shuster died on July 30th, 1992, and Jerry Siegel passed away on January 28th, 1996. But their creation lives on. There have been countless television and movie adaptations featuring their character. Superman continues to be popular and reinvented for each successive generation. The genre of superheroes, which was sparked by Superman in 1938, has become box office gold for both DC and Marvel Comics. Superheroes of all kinds on TV, in film, and in comics have proliferated and become a medium of storytelling for all ages. And even with the passing of Siegel and Shuster in the 1990s, Superman remains one of the most recognized characters in all of pop culture over 80 years after his creation by two Jewish high school students from the Glenville neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don, for that truly incredible presentation. I look forward to coming to see the exhibit in the library in person someday. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, we have a pre-recorded message from Sam Asher, Executive Director of the Virginia Holocaust Museum, home of the Jewish American Hall of Fame plaques. Previously, Sam was CEO of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond, Executive Director or Executive Vice President of the Jewish Federation of Delaware, Executive Director of the Hartford Jewish Federation, and he also led the St. Paul United Jewish Fund and Council. So I will share my screen in just a moment here and play Sam's message.
Hi, my name is Sam Asher. I'm Executive Director of the Virginia Holocaust Museum, and you are here with me right now in the synagogue of the Virginia Holocaust Museum. This is the area where the Jewish American Hall of Fame behind me resides as a permanent exhibit. And I will tell you that thousands of school children have seen this exhibit over the years, and we continue to bring them to see it because it's so relevant to life in general, but also for Americans to see how prevalent and the fantastic impact that so many leaders had on the beginning of the state, beginning of the United States, and certainly all the way up until today. So I'm sitting in front of the exhibit, which begins with people who helped Columbus, the Touro Synagogue, and I'll focus here on Chaim Solomon, who was a financier in the 1770s to help the Continental Army survive, and did numerous types of financing so that our country could come into being, and General Washington was able to have the effect that he had, and we were able to beat the British and start the most amazing country in the world. So I'm going to move down a little bit to another section of this phenomenal exhibit and talk about Commodore Uriah Phillips Levy. Commodore Levy is incredibly important also because through his life he was able to prove his love for the country in the Navy, but also over time was able to build it up enough finances so that he had this estate and was able to leave Monticello in a trust that inevitably was deeded over to the state of Virginia. And we have the state of Monticello today, the estate of Monticello today, where people can see what went on Jefferson's estate. And it's fraught with some interesting problems because Jefferson was a slaveholder. And so this is, but it's also shown in the Monticello estate. Although fraught with problems, it's very important that the country, as well as the state of Virginia, has Monticello for many, many years, and we'll have it for the future to see what happened there with one of the creators of the United States and the brilliance of Jefferson in helping to start our country. I will go down to one more great, actually two more greats. One is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed away almost a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago during COVID. She was appointed by Bill Clinton and sworn in as the 107th Justice for the United States Supreme Court. Her amazing ability in the courts is very, very well known. A brilliant, brilliant person, and really a mentor, a figure for people to see as a great woman of stature in this country and in the law. And we are so pleased that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is part of the Jewish American Hall of Fame. I'll now move down to one of my favorite people who set another example, but her example was in the process of going to Israel, being one of the founders of the state of Israel, absolutely going from Milwaukee to Israel and then coming back to America when needed in 1947 and 1948 to raise money to start the country. Ben-Gurion appointed her to go as the ambassador, not only to Moscow, but later to come here to help raise money to make sure that they had enough funding to complete the War of Independence. And so Golda Meir is a great hero to me, and I think should be a hero to many. Gave all that she had to help create the State of Israel. And now I'll move on to the current inductees for the Hall of Fame. And I am very, very pleased to present for your viewing pleasure, and I know you're going to induct them in your meeting in the next few minutes, the plaque for Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, who are being inducted into the Jewish American Hall of Fame in 2021. I talk to students about this plaque a lot already, even though we've only had it a short time. If anyone looks up the word superheroes on the computer, there are many. It's incredible how many superheroes are up there. We're not only talking about Superman, which of course was first penned by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and Batman and Iron Man and the Hulk and Captain America. And by the way, the latest Wonder Woman is an Israeli woman, which I think is wonderful. But when you look at when the first issue of Action Comics was released with Superman lifting a car above his head, it was April 18, 1938. And the year 1938, of course, is the year when Kristallnacht took place, the Night of the Broken Glass, on November 9 and 10. It was the beginning of the end for the Jewish people in Europe. It was the beginning of the most terrible atrocity known to mankind called the Holocaust. And it's interesting that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster penned Superman at that time because the world needed a superhero. And I think it's been said that one of the reasons for the early success of Superman was how Siegel wrote about real issues that affected everyday people. And certainly at that, as time passed, Hitler's rise in Europe and his anti-Semitic words and negative stereotypes of the Jewish people pushed Siegel and Shuster to make heroes that defended the weak and tell the stories that would cheer Americans as things looked somewhat bleak. They certainly were writing at a time, and by the way, the superheroes were the United States Army, the Allied forces that came and freed Europe, even the Russian forces that came from the East, and the British and the Americans and the Canadians and the Australians who came from the West and freed many of the concentration camps. So it is poignant that we're bringing Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster into the American Jewish or Jewish American Hall of Fame. We wish you all well in your meeting, and I will tell you that many, many students will see this plaque and be told the important story that it represents.
Thank you, Sam, for giving us this insightful tour of the Hall of Fame's plaques. If you're ever in the Richmond, Virginia area, I highly recommend visiting the permanent exhibit of the Jewish American Hall of Fame plaques. Next, we have a special message from my dear friend, Elan Carr, former US Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism at the US State Department, and member of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement Advisory Board. Elan Carr was appointed by the President of the United States and the Secretary of State to the Office of United States Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism in 2019. Mr. Carr served as the senior diplomatic representative of the United States and senior advisor to the Secretary of State on the subject of anti-Semitism, and he directed US policy and programs aimed at combating it. During his 2 years in office, he negotiated groundbreaking agreements with foreign governments, convened the first ever US government-sponsored conference on combating online hate, drove the establishment of important new policies on anti-Zionism and anti-Israel discrimination and campus anti-Semitism. He focused the attention of law enforcement leaders across international jurisdictions on the importance of hate crimes prosecutions and launched philo-Semitism initiatives in multiple countries. Prior to his role as Special Envoy, Mr. Carr prosecuted violent felony crimes for more than a decade as a deputy district attorney for Los Angeles County. Mr. Carr is an officer in the United States Army Reserve and has received multiple awards for his 2 decades of military service. While on military deployment in Iraq, he helped lead a joint anti-terrorism team in life-saving missions and prosecuted terrorists who attacked US troops. He was also part of the Coalition Provisional Authority's efforts to establish an independent Iraqi judiciary. As the son of Jewish refugees from Iraq, Mr. Carr speaks Hebrew and the Iraqi dialect of Arabic. While in Iraq, he met with remnants of the Jewish community there and worked with them to preserve Jewish texts and other property. He regularly led Jewish services in the former presidential palace of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad. And in just a moment, I will share former Special Envoy Carr's pre-recorded message for us today.
Hello and welcome. I'm Elan Carr, and I am deeply honored to join with you today as we celebrate the extraordinary legacy of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, creators of, well, not just any superhero, but the first and the greatest of them all, Superman. When I served as US Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, I was often asked whether we can ever truly win the war against what is often called the world's oldest hatred. The answer I give is this: while we must always defend against anti-Semitism, we will never win a strategic victory only by playing defense. Winning the war requires that we turn the tables on anti-Semitism and proactively combat it through philo-Semitism, namely by driving narratives that inculcate an appreciation of the incredible story of the Jewish people and that create an affection for the values of Judaism that have shaped so many aspects of our society and our world. Philo-Semitism is the ultimate answer to anti-Semitism. That's one of the many reasons I am so excited to help honor Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and to be part of their most deserved induction into the Jewish American Hall of Fame. Creating one of America's greatest fictional icons, who became synonymous with the fight for, quote, truth, justice, and the American way, would by itself have earned these two Jewish Americans a place in the Hall of Fame. But it's not only that Superman was invented by Jews. No less significant is that Jewish ideas and experiences are reflected in so many aspects of the Superman story. If any mortal in Jewish history can be thought of as a kind of superfigure, it must surely be Moses. As we know, Moses was born in a land far away, under circumstances that would have doomed him to die in infancy. With no other way to save him, his family made the heart-wrenching decision to abandon their child by floating him down the Nile River in a waterproof basket in desperate hope that he would somehow defy the odds and survive. Moses was found by a family that adopted and raised him, and he grew up to become God's great prophet. Krypton instead of Egypt, a small capsule instead of a woven basket, outer space instead of the Nile, the Kents instead of Ramses. But both children, the real one and the fictional, grew up to be extraordinary adults whose fight for, yes, truth and justice changed the world, and in whose presence were revealed breathtaking powers and miracles and wonders the likes of which humanity had never imagined. Even the birth name that Superman's creators gave him, Kal-El, is in the biblical format of the names of God's archangels, Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, winged messengers of the Almighty, in whom God invested awesome powers. Is it any wonder that the Nazi propaganda machine of Joseph Goebbels denounced Superman as a Jewish plot? But it's not only the biblical Jewish story that is reflected in Superman's life. Also woven into his character are modern themes touching on the Jewish diaspora, themes of which Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were personally and intimately familiar. Superman's prodigious powers, and even his very identity, are somehow concealed without any mask. Superman is able to hide in plain sight in the form of, quote, mild-mannered Clark Kent. Mild-mannered is a nice way of calling him, to use a Yiddish word, nebbish. He appears weak, ineffectual, hapless. In short, the very opposite of a superhero. And he is often bullied and derided for those very traits. Clark's disguise is not of his face, but of his character and of his abilities. And in Siegel and Shuster's world, that is enough to make him completely unrecognizable. Mark Twain famously wrote of the strength of the Jewish people in the face of apparent powerlessness. Quote, "It will not be well to let the Jewish race find out its strength," he wrote. "If horses knew theirs, we should not ride anymore." Twain wrote those words in 1898. But in the time of Superman's creation, 1938, 3 years after the Nuremberg laws, and a few months before Kristallnacht, Jews seemed as powerless as ever. and the august impact of the Jews on virtually every aspect of civilization seemed like the powers of Superman to hide in plain sight. Was it by design that these Jewish themes found such expression in the story of Superman? Or did the personal experiences of Jerry Siegel, whose parents fled anti-Semitism in Lithuania, and Joe Shuster, whose parents left Ukraine and other parts of Europe, unconsciously inform their creation? Either way, their brilliant work has bequeathed to us happy beneficiaries an enduring and inspiring gift. A uniquely American icon at a time when the American way is under attack. A champion for truth and justice in a world where truth and justice is so often subverted. And a philo-Semitic embrace of the Jewish people and the Jewish story. Jerry and Joe, thank you, and mazal tov on today's well-earned recognition.
Thank you, Elan, for sharing this timely and important message with us today. I'd now like to introduce Eugene Daub, who is an American contemporary figure sculptor, best known for his portraits and figurative monument sculptures created in the classic heroic style. His sculptures reside in 3 of the nation's state capitals, and his Rosa Parks statue was unveiled by President Obama in National Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol. In 1991, Eugene had the distinction of winning both the American Numismatic Association's Numismatic Art Award for Excellence in Medallic Sculpture and the American Numismatic Society's J. Sanford Saltus Medal Award for Lifetime Achievement in Medallic Art. Eugene is a prolific medal maker, and beginning in 2007, he has created 14 art medals and plaques for the Jewish American Hall of Fame, including the 2021 medal and plaque for Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eugene.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you some of my work, and thank you for it's wonderful to honor the artist in this case of Superman, and thank you, Mel, for the opportunity to do all these medals. I've learned so much, and thank you, Don, for this great exhibit. And I'm just going to take you through the steps that we go through. So Mel, if you want to show the first slide, and this shows the final struck medal. And to give you some idea of the size of it, you can kind of look at the background. You can see the folds in my palm of my hand. They're quite small, and yet it's amazing the amount of detail this process is able to provide. Next slide, please. And this is this is usually where we start. You know, after Mel and the committee have decided who they're going to honor, you know, Mel will sit down and kind of think about how he wants to present this, and then we'll sit down and discuss the photographs and which ones we think would make the best medal. And so here you can see the original photograph on the right, and then on the left you can see the illustration. And this artist has taken some liberties with the illustration. And if you notice, the size of the arm on the lower figure is much smaller in the left-hand photograph, and the distance between the heads are a lot smaller. Again, in this case, for the purposes of the illustration, I'm not sure what their final goal was, whether it was to condense this for something or other. But in any event, ultimately my goal is to figure out how to compress this information best into a medal, into a 3-inch medal. And next slide, Mel, please. And so this is Mel's original sketch, showing basically what he has in mind, how to show the two authors. Next slide, please. And this is version 1 and version 2 of my sketches. And so you can see on the first one, the first thing I've done is I've shown it pretty close to the way it was in the original illustration. And then on the second, I've changed quite a few things to get the images a little bit larger, because it's important to get the faces as large as possible on a metal this small. So I've closed the gap between the heads. I've also made Jerry Siegel's image a little bit smaller, and I brought out Joe Shuster to get the heads about the same size. I've also raised or increased the size of the arm on the bottom, and I've also enlarged the area for Superman's face. So next slide, please. And this is, before we go into the final changes, this is my process of modeling. And many times I'll start with a plaster basin with the shape, that trapezoidal shape of the Jewish American Hall of Fame medals, and work within that border. But on some cases where we want to really get the image as large as possible, we'll simply just push the borders away entirely. And in this case, I filled the whole basin with clay, and I begin to carve the clay away. And that's where you can see these lightened areas are where my tool is starting to carve the clay away. So at this point, it becomes sort of a combination between carving and modeling. And if you look real close, you can see the words that will ultimately be carved in, and then finally on the right. So this is sort of a combination of incused or intaglio carved technique, and also paired with a more traditional modeling technique. And it's the reason I did that was to get a shadow around their profile, which heightens the separation and the readability of it at a reduced size. Next slide, please. And now we're at this point, when the clay is finally approved by Mel, I will move ahead and make a plaster negative, and then ultimately a plaster positive, which this is on the right. And at this point, Mel is a little concerned about the image of Superman. And we had already tried to reduce the recognizability a little bit by taking away the Superman curl and some of the distinctness of the cape and everything. But Mel had thought maybe it would be safer just to show a comic strip from Superman. And so we laid it in there, and ultimately I did a pencil sketch you can see on the left, and then I reduced it to the size that it would be on the metal. And at that point, we realized that it would just, at that reduced size, it would just be totally unreadable. So we moved back to the version 4, which is on the next step. Next slide, please. And so here we are at the version 2. And so the next thing that I did was I put the Superman image underneath Joe Shuster's arm to slightly obscure it. We took away the curl and the pompadour. We took away the cape, so as to make it a little less significant. Next slide, please. And that eventually became the final design. And then the next step is for us to send it to the mint, or for Mel to send it to the mint, and they scan it and they convert it into a die, which you see on the upper top left hand side. That's the metal die down at the actual size, and then on the lower right is the final struck metal. And you could go to the next slide, and I believe the final slide. And this is the final struck medal with the patina. And I think there's one more slide, Mel, if you want to move to that. And that's the showing the obverse and the reverse. And on the reverse side, Mel did a little creative thing. He usually uses the just the logo, the Jewish American logo on some of the medals. And in this case, for Superman, he added the POW and that kind of graphic solution that was used so commonly in superhero comics. And that concludes my presentation.
Well, that was truly fascinating, Eugene. Thank you for bringing that.
Can I just add something? First of all, I want to wish Eugene a happy birthday, which was yesterday. And I want to show, this is what an actual medal looks like. That's the size. Ah, thank you.
And now it's in focus. Great.
It's backwards.
No, it's good. You're good.
We can see it, yes. Thank you.
No, it was backwards. No.
Well, thank you for showing us that, Mel. And Eugene, thank you for joining us and bringing the creative process to light and helping us commemorate Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in such a nice way. Now, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Abby Schwartz, who has served as the director of the Skirball Museum on the campus of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, since 2013. In 2019, she mounted the exhibit, Striking Medals, 50 Years of the Jewish American Hall of Fame. Afterwards, the Skirball Museum became the official home of the Jewish American Hall of Fame medal collection. Abby is the former curator of education at the Taft Museum of Art and has lectured widely on Jewish art, notably at the Melton School and the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute of the University of Cincinnati. Abby is the recipient of the 2000 Museum Educator of the Year Award from the Ohio Art Education Association and was the first national coordinator for Jewish American Heritage Month, serving from 2009 through 2015. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm delighted to be a participant and to have an opportunity to share the way that we have been incorporating the Jewish American Hall of Fame medals into the Skirball Museum, which is on the campus of Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, the birthplace of the Reform movement in Judaism and the home of the first seminary for training rabbis for the American rabbinate, founded in 1875. So our museum is housed on this campus. This is our building, the exterior, and here we are on the inside of the museum. And it was through Mel, my experience with Mel during the time that I was serving as the national coordinator of a Jewish American Heritage Month. We struck up a fast friendship, and we talked about the possibility of one of the great heroes of American Reform Judaism, Isaac Mayer Wise, being an inductee, and being nominated, and then ultimately becoming an inductee into the Jewish American Hall of Fame in 2019, which was the 200th anniversary of Isaac Mayer Wise's birth. So that, in fact, did come to pass, and we mounted an entire exhibition of all of the medals of the Jewish American Hall of Fame up to that point in that year, in the 200th anniversary year of the birth of Isaac Mayer Wise. So I'm going to share a few slides from that installation where we were so fortunate to have Mel had us or sent to us for this exhibition two medals of each honoree so that we could display the front and the back, because as Eugene mentioned, or he doesn't always just put the logo on the back. Sometimes the story is so dense that you need two sides to tell it. And so in many instances that is the case, and we were able to display both sides. So we started with an early history of portrait medals. We were loaned some medals that are not part of the Jewish American Hall of Fame fan base, so to speak, but medals that are part of Mel's collection that helped us to tell the story of how commemorative medals came to be, going all the way back to the Renaissance. And then in our temporary gallery, which is on the second floor of our museum, sorry that this one isn't great quality. I didn't realize that it was not well focused, but it does give you a little bit of a sense of the way we laid it out. We created this display in categories. We had science and medicine, we had entertainment, we had public service, various different categories that enabled people to view these medals in sequence, so to speak. Here you see public servants and philanthropists, advocacy and education. And there, as you can see, there are 2 of each medal so that people could see both front and back. Music and literature, pop culture, these were all categories, and you can see how they were displayed and how the material that we included in terms of biographical information about each honoree. We provided magnifying glass so people could get as up close and personal as possible, and it was very, very well received. Just running through these rather quickly. This is the Isaac Mayer Wise medal that Eugene Daub did create, and it was so great to see that process explained, Eugene, in your remarks. And in this case, he worked from an earlier piece of sculpture of Isaac Mayer Wise by Boris Schatz, who was an early artist who founded the Bezalel School in Jerusalem. This is a signature look for Isaac Mayer Wise with his glasses pushed up on his forehead. Looks a little stern in this particular image, but we're good with that. And then the back of this particular medal had the breastplate that was given to Isaac Mayer Wise by his students. And just as Eugene explained, what was on this cartouche was way too detailed to be able to be read on a medal this size. So we condensed it and just used his Hebrew name, Yitzhak Mayer Weiss, which is Isaac Mayer Wise. We had a wonderful opportunity, again, recalling what was said about the actual plasters and the clay models. We had the opportunity to display the entire process up to the point of the actual minting of the piece, which was explained in a different section of the exhibition. But here we show the final large plaque. We show the breastplate that was used for the reverse. You can't see it, I don't think, in this image, or maybe I'm hiding it. Oh, right here in the description, we have the actual Boris Schatz piece that inspired this particular portrait. And we see the sketches for both sides, and then these tiny little medals here that are the finished product on the far right. We also had a section where we showed video, and we did explain the process here of making the medal. Mel loaned us all of the various stages of making the medal, from the original plain piece of bronze to the final product, and the explanation of the process is here on the wall as well. And then over here, you can't see it that well on this slide, but we gave opportunities for people to tell us who belongs in the Jewish American Hall of Fame and why. So it was always interesting each week to pull those down and see how many duplicates we had and see how many were really unusual. I passed those all along to Mel, and who knows, maybe some of these people will someday be put into the Jewish American Hall of Fame. We had a wonderful opportunity to give a lecture at the outset of the program, sort of explaining all the different people that could be seen in the show. And I'm showing you here Mel himself, who was an honoree in 2012. Is that right? Or 2013? So. We also created a 3D virtual tour of the exhibition, which is still available at that address. If you take a picture of it with your phone, that'll be the easiest thing. You can pull up that that virtual tour, which still is archived on our website. And in other ways, we've tried to display different medals from the collection. From time to time. We don't have a space where it can be fully on view right now, maybe someday, but depending on different things that are happening locally in Cincinnati, we have pulled out various medals and displayed them in the context of different things that are happening in town. So during the year of the passage or the anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted the women the right to vote, there was a community-wide celebration called the Power of Her. And we displayed in that year several medals, one of which was mentioned today, Gertrude Elan. So Mel, when you mentioned her, I knew who she was, but we did feature the medals of Emma Lazarus. We featured the medal of Ernestine Rose, Henrietta Zold, Gertrude Elan, and Rebecca Gratz. All of these women making major inroads in various fields, and we displayed these for an entire year in a dedicated space in our lobby, which is still our dedicated space for showing medals of the Jewish American Hall of Fame. Last summer, we actually honored Dara Torres, who was the 2020 Jewish American Hall of Fame honoree. We showed it during the summer because the Olympic Games had been postponed until 2021. So we showed them just this past summer, and we were able to display her medal, the plaster model, and the drawings and watercolor that preceded the actual medal itself. Right now on view in our lobby in that dedicated space are 5 medals of people in our collection, in this collection, who have an association with Cincinnati, because this year is the bicentennial of Jewish Cincinnati. We are celebrating 200 years of organized Jewish life in Cincinnati, which began in the year 1821. So in this collection, in this group, we have one of the 4 chaplains. It's a very important story from the Second World War, in which 4 chaplains of different faiths, including a Jewish chaplain who was ordained at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, gave up their life jackets to save as many of their crew as they can, and perished. Of course, Isaac Mayer Wise, Lillian Wald, Adolph Ochs, who is the publisher of the New York Times, who was born in Cincinnati and was married to Isaac Wise's daughter, and Judah Magnus, who was the first native Californian to attend Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati and went on to great fame and importance in the Jewish community, both in California and in Jerusalem. So with that, and this shows the installation of those 5 medals with important Cincinnati connections. Of course, we've just received our Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster medals, and we will definitely be planning some programming around them. After today's program, I now have contacts with some people who could probably help me with some public programming, and we will be approaching that as a program in the spring of 2022, delivering hopefully an in-person and virtual event. And I think that is all that I have for my share. So I will close my screen or stop my share, and we can move on. Thank you.
That was amazing, Abby. Thank you so much for sharing the details of the exhibit through your presentation, and it's an honor to have the medals hosted at the Skirball Museum, and thank you for ensuring that future generations have the opportunity to learn about the contributions of these Jewish Americans. So thank you. For the next segment of our program, we have the special opportunity to hear from members of the Siegel and Shuster families. And before I move on to that segment, I just want to let our audience know that after this segment, we'll have a short Q&A. So if you have any questions for the panelists today, feel free to put them in the chat function of the Zoom. Now, I'm happy to introduce a very special guest, Gary Kaplan. Gary is a native of Cleveland, Ohio, the home of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and he's currently the acting president of the Siegel and Shuster Society, which coordinated the renovation of Jerry Siegel's childhood home in 2009. Gary's mother was a close cousin of Jerry Siegel and would often visit the Siegel family home in the 1930s. Gary, thank you so much for being here with us today. Gary, you're on mute. If you could unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, as he said, I am Gary Kaplan. I am the president of the Siegel and Shuster Society, and I am also a relative of Jerry Siegel. In 2007, Mike Sangiacomo of the Cleveland Plain Dealer wrote a full-page column questioning why the city where Superman was created didn't celebrate his creators. It was a call to action. Within weeks, a group of dedicated business professionals, educators, and relatives of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster joined to form the Siegel and Shuster Society. The mission of the society is to commemorate the creation of Superman in Cleveland. In 2009, the Siegel and Shuster Society, with the help of author Brad Meltzer, renovated the boyhood home of Jerry Siegel. They also erected a fence at the former site of Joe Shuster's apartment, featuring panels from the very first Superman comic book, Action Comics #1. In 2012, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, in coordination with the Siegel and Shuster Society, unveiled a permanent Superman display featuring a statue of Superman, a telephone booth, and a sign reading, "Welcome to Cleveland, where the legend began." In 2013, the Siegel and Shuster Society mounted a successful statewide petition drive for an Ohio license plate bearing the iconic Superman insignia and the words, "Truth, Justice, and the American Way." When I was 5 years old, I used to watch The Adventures of Superman on TV with George Reeves. One day, my mother walked into the room and said, "You know, my cousin Jerry and his friend Joe created Superman." She then walked out of the room, and I thought to myself, what did she just say? Because when I was 5, I didn't know that. Later, she told me that her and her siblings used to go over to the Siegel house on a regular basis, and she used to play with Jerry all the time. My mom's older brother, Jerry Fine, told his cousin Jerry Siegel that he wanted to introduce him to a good friend of his named Joe Shuster. "Joe's a very talented guy," he would tell him. "He can illustrate some of your ideas." They were all around 15 years old at that time. It's important to note that without that historic introduction, there may never have been a Superman. My mother's younger brother, Fine, he was a real mensch and a very important role model for me. He was also one of the founding members of the Siegel and Shuster Society. Irv was instrumental in so many society projects, but especially the Superman license plate and the airport exhibits. I need to also mention Mike Olszewski, our former president, who led all these projects with my Uncle Irv. In 2014, Irv asked me to get involved in the Siegel and Shuster Society, and the following year I joined the board. Sadly, Irv passed away in 2016. I know he would have been so proud to see Jerry and Joe being inducted into the Jewish American Hall of Fame. On behalf of my family and the Siegel and Shuster Society, I would like to thank you for choosing Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster for this wonderful honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for sharing your family stories and memories and helping us bring Jerry and Joe's legacies to life. That was really special. I'm honored to now introduce Laura Siegel Larson, the daughter of Jerry Siegel and Joanne, who was the model who posed for artist and co-creator Joe Shuster when he first drew Lois Lane in 1935. As an executive producer for the Walt Disney Company's news department at KCAL TV, Laura has had hands-on creative involvement in more than 30 TV specials and 120 miniseries. Her work has often dealt with issues such as preventing violence, raising awareness about abuse, the law, and health, and overcoming bigotry. She has won more than 100 state, national, and international awards, including 13 Emmys. Thank you for joining us today, Laura.
It's a great pleasure. Wow, this is so interesting. I'm learning all kinds of stuff, and everyone who's made a presentation so far has really touched me. All of the love and the work that you have put into honoring my dad and Joe, his best friend. I know that my dad and my mom would have loved this. And I'm so sad that they are not still alive to see some of the honors such as this one that have been coming their way. Thinking of my dad and family stories, I want to share one right from the beginning. This is my story in a way. My dad was always at the typewriter. And even when he wasn't writing Superman, he was always writing something. And when I was just very, very young, the first thing that I would hear every morning would be the sound of the typewriter, rat-a-tat-tat. My dad typed so fast. It was amazing. And, so when I was older, I was still hearing that. But my association with my dad's typewriter is that when I was just a few months old, my dad put me on his lap at the typewriter. And I thought it was, just like really fun to bang on the keys. And so I did that. And I've got a few photos that unfortunately I don't have with me today of me at the typewriter at about 8 months old. And as I grew older, I didn't think of it as a toy anymore. I really knew that it was a tool to be able to take, what is inside you and express it to other people. That's certainly what my dad did. Pardon me. When he was at the typewriter, a friend of his, when he was in junior high school, had a typewriter. My dad didn't have one yet. And so he went over to this friend's house, and his friend taught him how to type. And it was something that, of course, stayed with my dad his entire life. He and this friend originally were trying to put out a self-published pamphlet at that time. This is all pre-Joe Shuster. And my dad had started writing science fiction when he was like a really young kid. He loved all of the pulp magazines that were out, everything having to do with science fiction and adventure. And he actually got to know about those because one of his brothers used to bring them home and, toss them my dad's way. My dad was the youngest of 6 people in his family, and he was much younger than his brothers and sisters. But those magazines that he got from his brother Harry started him on the path of loving these imaginative stories that had been written in the pulp magazines. So my dad, started writing and writing and writing and reading. The Cleveland Public Library was actually one of his favorite spots on earth, even as he grew up. And that was the place where Jerry and Joe met for the first time. Even though they were going to Glenville High, they met in the library. They had set that up, that they were going to meet at the library. So getting back to my dad and his writing, he was in elementary school when he started really being serious with the idea that he wanted to be a writer when he grew up. And he actually had a letter published in the Cleveland Plain Dealer when he was 11. And so that was really huge to him, to see his name in print in, the biggest newspaper in Cleveland, which was, his entire world at that point was Cleveland. And so he went on from that to writing stories, and a lot of what he did was influenced by his family. His mother was very, very active in Jewish charities. In Cleveland, there was an orphan home, and she was one of the directors of that. She was on the board of directors. And so when my dad used to think of his mom, who passed away when he was still a teenager. No, actually, he was an adult. He passed away. His dad passed away when he was a teenager. The loss of both parents had a big influence on him, because they had provided, safety from things that had been going on in the world. But there was a lot of discussion of current events in the family, in that house that was renovated by the Siegel and Shuster Society. And all of the people who lived there, his mother, his father, his older siblings, were voracious newspaper readers. So they would read, what was going on in the world. And particularly when my dad was very young, about 5 years old, his grandmother and grandfather on his mom's side had come over from Lithuania. And they had a big connection to what was still going on back in the old country. So they discussed anti-Semitism quite a bit. As was already mentioned, the whole reason that my dad was born in America is that his parents had immigrated to the United States to get away from the restrictions and the bullying and the downright meanness that his family and all of the other Jewish families in their town and in their country were experiencing. It was so dreadful that they took what little they had and found a way to get to America. My grandfather, as was mentioned, the original family name was Sigalovich. He came over in 1900, right at the start of the new century. And 2 years later, my grandmother and the two oldest children in the family came over to the United States. And then the other 4 children were born in the US. There were a lot of influences on my dad. I mentioned the family influence was really big. But I think my dad used to tell me that besides newspapers being huge in his life and joining school newspapers and things like that, the bullying that he received as a child made him long for justice, long for a way to fight back. But he was he was a nebbish. he had dreams of being big and powerful and trying to right the wrongs in the world. So he started writing stories, but he put it in kind of a fantasy science fiction arena. And when he was really, really young, he took one of these stories into school and showed it to his teacher. And his English teacher acknowledged that he was a really good writer, but asked him why he wasted his time writing stuff like that. And, that there were so many bigger, more wonderful ways to express himself. I think, she wanted him to write essays or, be a novelist or something like that. And at that time, of course, as you know, comic strips were only in the newspaper, and they were regarded as kind of low class. They weren't really considered literature, which is all the more reason that I'm particularly proud, and my dad would have just been thrilled, that you're inducting him into the Hall of Fame in the category of literature. And of course, comic strips and Superman in particular, and Slam Bradley and the Spectre and Dr. Occult and all of these many characters that he created were, in his way, a way of fighting back against the bullies. He was able to create what he couldn't be himself. And he was fighting back for himself. He was fighting back for everyone who was oppressed. A lot of that being through anti-Semitism, but also people who just didn't really care about another person's feelings, or didn't really care about justice and wanted to take advantage of people for the sake of money or for whatever reason, there was. So, my dad thought of one character after another. The first Superman was a villain. And then he realized that it would be more accepted by publishers. He had been sending out all these different versions of things that he had written for year after year after year, and got rejections, and got a ton of rejections for Superman once he and Joe teamed up on the final version of Superman. One of the comments was it was just too fantastic. Nobody would believe that that somebody could do all of these super things that Superman was doing. But eventually, he did get the final version that he and Joe did published. They wanted it to be a comic strip, but it turned out that they were able to get it published as a comic book instead, and comic books were like brand new on the scene. But seeing his name in print, knowing that he was doing something that was worthwhile and that was good, and that made him proud of himself and made other people dream that they could always find something special within themselves, the way Superman did. That was really important. And my dad continued to write the Superman stories for year after year after year. And I've been talking like really way too long, probably, but I've got 1,000 more stories that I could share. But anyway, thank you so much for this wonderful honor, and thank you to all of the speakers who have been wonderful. And Eugene, you did a fantastic job on the medal. It was really beautiful work, and it looks so realistic. And I can feel the love that you put into doing that. And I particularly want to thank you on behalf of my dad and also Joe, who is like an uncle to me. So thank you all very much for this fantastic honor.
Thank you for sharing your family's story and your firsthand account of your father. It was so special, and I think that your family's journey to America and origin story, so many Jewish Americans can relate to that, and your father's life from childhood on through creating Superman is truly inspiring, and I hope that sharing his story today will help inspire a new generation of people in that regard. So thank you, Laura, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'd now like to introduce Lee Goldie. Lee is a board member of the Siegel and Shuster Society, as well as a relative of Joe Shuster. Lee, thank you for joining us to help celebrate Joe Shuster today.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart from Joe's family, Joe's side of the family, because getting Jerry and Joe recognized is such a big deal to us. Jerry and Joe were very quiet. I know that Joe was extremely quiet because he was my grandfather's first cousin. They were 6 weeks apart and they grew up together in Toronto, Canada, and used to play all the time and were very close. But then when Joe was 10, he moved to Cleveland, and they didn't lose connection because every summer Joe would go back to Canada to spend time with the family. But he was just like my grandfather, a very quiet person. So you would never expect that this mild-mannered person would be able to take Jerry's idea that, if I'm saying this correctly, Laura, Jerry created Superman. While he was sleeping, he couldn't sleep, and he kept getting up and writing things down, and then went back to sleep, and then got up and wrote more, and then went back to sleep again, and then got up and wrote more. And then he took the idea and ran, supposedly, legend has it, 9 blocks to Joe's house and said, "I need you to draw this." And all of a sudden, Joe's idea of Superman became created. And that's just an amazing story, because this mild-mannered man, you would never expect Joe to create it. Yet he and Jerry have created a character that is known worldwide. In whatever language you speak, you say the word Superman and everyone knows what that means. So the impact that he has had on everyday life is just so huge. He used to draw on parchment paper. His parents would go to the butcher shop and they didn't have extra paper. So when they would unwrap the meat, that's what he would draw on. And that's just a story that will stick with me forever because of the hardships that they were enduring when they came to America and were trying to fit in as Jewish people. I am a Sunday school teacher. I've been teaching Sunday school for over 20 years. And one of the things that I happen to love to teach, they always put me in charge of it, is superheroes in Judaism. And I love teaching about Jerry and Joe because while they were so quiet, what they did was so impactful and has changed the course of society forever. I love talking about some of the specific topics like the Holocaust, or like the Holocaust, where they fight for the underdog. And that's, the Jewish people were the underdog in many cases, not just in the Holocaust, but they're just representing that. And it means so much. Their legacy will never die. And what I love about the honoring Jerry and Joe today is you're helping their memory of what they've created live on. Thank you so much for honoring them today.
Thank you, Lee. That was really inspiring, and you really honored Joe's memory. And I loved just your personal piece about the family connection, your grandfather's cousin, and just to share personally, my involvement now in the Jewish American Hall of Fame is Mel Wacks is my grandmother's first cousin, so it feels like a similar connection in doing this important work. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for honoring Joe's legacy. Really appreciate it. So thank you all. A few audience questions have come in for the panelists, and I can pose them to you now. And if anyone else has a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will pose them to the panel. Just give me a second here. One question regarding the Hall of Fame. So Mel, I think this one is for you. Is there a way for people to nominate future nominees for the Jewish American Hall of Fame?
Okay, you can not make a nomination, send it to me at director, JAHF@yahoo.com. We have a wonderful committee. Abby Schwartz is the newest member of that committee. And we have a committee of educators and Jewish leaders, and they vote each year. Now, unlike like the Baseball Hall of Fame or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we only nominate one or at most two people a year. So it's very difficult to get into the Jewish American Hall of Fame. But write to me at director, JAHF@yahoo.com. And if you are interested in a medal by any chance, write to me there too. We have just a couple left. Thank you. Sorry for the commercial message.
Thank you, Mel. Someone also asked if this will be recorded and accessed later. Yes, it will be on YouTube later this week, and it can be viewed now live, and the recording on the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's Facebook page, and we can make that available to you. The next question is for Laura. Can you tell us what you remember about your parents' reaction to seeing the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie?
Oh boy. Well, we were invited to the premiere, and with my mom, my dad, Joe Shuster, and I went, and it was the most spectacular event for all of us, because there had been a very, very long period when people had no idea who had created Superman. The credit line had been taken off everything, newspaper strip, any book that would come out, comic books, animation, none of those ever, during a period of, to me, it seemed like forever. It was before I was born, more than 30 years. And at that time, my dad had launched a campaign for recognition for himself and for Joe. And newspapers got involved. They started writing articles. My dad was working for the Public Utilities Commission of Los Angeles, or actually California, at the time. And he put those typing skills to work because he was able to type, so he got a clerk typist position, and people were coming to his workplace and interviewing him there. But this campaign that was going on was to restore recognition to Jerry and Joe, and in addition to that, to give them some kind of compensation, because they had really lived in poverty for a very, very long time. And my dad fought for authors' rights and lost many, many times. But, they finally, with the help of Neil Adams and Jerry Robinson, who at that time was the president of the National Cartoonist Society, they teamed up and put some pressure on the copyright holder, which was DC Comics. And in addition, when they finally reached a point at which DC and Time Warner, which was the parent company, agreed that they would get some compensation. It was like a pension for them for starting the comic book industry, starting superheroes, but specifically for Superman. And there were at the last minute, there were a ton of phone calls about what's going to happen with the movie. And initially they said, well, it's too late. We can't put the credit for them on the movie. But Jerry Robinson and Neil Adams were so persistent that the credit did get on the film. So we went to the premiere. I was sitting between my parents and Joe was next to my dad. And at the beginning, when the music started, the John Williams score, there was silence in the place. All the stars of the movie were there, except Marlon Brando, who sent his regards. But everybody was silent in the theater. And when the credits rolled, I was squeezing my parents' hands and they were squeezing mine. And then when Superman, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, flew onto the screen, the audience started applauding. And I started crying. And it was an unbelievable experience to see that recognition after so long. And it was a great movie too.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Laura. That was really nice to hear and inspiring. But we have one more question. Someone would like to know if any of Joe or Jerry's relatives read the 2001 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, which is a fictional story about the two creators of the Superman comic strip in New York City. Do you think the book was inspired by the real creators?
I have something to say about that.
Sure, go ahead.
Is there anybody else who wants to make a comment? Okay, I met Michael Chabon at a writing convention, and fantastic guy, very talented, and he's done a lot of stuff. But he told me that it wasn't really based on Jerry and Joe. He took some things from legends of what had gone on in the comic book industry. There was certainly a part that was it sure sounded like the Jerry and Joe combination, how they came together. But where the story went after that was a combination of his imagination and taking other creative people's stories and weaving it together. So the answer is no, it was not really in the story of Jerry and Joe.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for answering that question, Laura. But before we conclude today's program, we do have a short historic video interview to share of our inductees, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, which, if you allow me just a moment here, I can share onto the program now.
Well, Superman came about because both Joe Shuster and I were great science fiction fans back in the 1930s. And to fill you in a little on the beginning of it all, one night, as has been mentioned in past stories, ideas kept coming to me, and I kept getting up again and again during the night and just jotting down these ideas and these scripts until very early the next morning I dashed over to Joe's house, which is about 10 blocks away. I showed him the script of Superman, the entirely new concept in which there would be a meek, mild manner reporter, Clark Kent, Lois Lane, who scorned him, but who flipped over Superman, not knowing that Superman and Clark Kent were one and the same person. Now, you want to stay? You want to stay with your reaction?
Well, I was very, very excited about the whole idea. I just took on the same enthusiasm. I thought it was a terrific idea, and we went right to work. Right then and there.
You sat down at the drawing board and you began designing the way the characters would look,
we spent the entire day working on it, all afternoon, and we at the drawing board Jerry and I, and
No, I
we
remember
designed,
that the matter of the costuming of Superman came
Yeah,
up, and
yeah,
I remember
uh-huh.
two suggestions I made to you. One, that the letter S
Well,
be on his chest.
right.
as
I
a
wanted to give
symbol.
him a skin-tight costume to show up his physique, for one thing, and then Jerry suggested putting on
a cape.
A cape,
So that when the character zoomed
so
through
that
the air,
you
would
could
give
get a
more
flowing-
action and movement
make
to the
it look
character.
like he's really flying, and very, very.
And of course,
colorful.
you added all those additional things like
Yeah,
the boots and the
Yeah.
belt and the
Yeah.
and the
I wanted
whatever.
to make it as simple as possible.
And what about Clark Kent?
Well, both Joe and I, wear glasses, most of the time, and it occurred to me that there was no adventure comic strip hero at that time who wore glasses, so I thought it would be quite different to have Clark Kent wear glasses, and also the wearing of glasses gives the impression of meekness and mildness, which goes into Harold Lloyd, the influence of Harold Lloyd on us and his movies. We were both great movie fans, and we especially loved some of those movies in which Harold Lloyd would start off as a sort of mama's boy, being pushed around, kicked around, thrown around, and then suddenly would turn into a fighting whirlwind.
Part of my own character too that I put into it. I was kind of mild mannered, and wore glasses, so I really identified with it.
Did you look in the mirror and sort of
Oh,
think,
many times for expressions, yeah. For facial expressions, I did look in the mirror. Oh, yes. That was part of it. That was part of the fun.
Can you show us what the original Superman looked like?
Here's the pencil sketch of the original Superman. That was the first cover of the Superman book. That was 1939.
And is that how it actually appeared?
Yeah, that's how he appeared. See?
Right. You were saying that some of the Superman poses. How did you get them?
Yes, I was a great fan of Douglas Fairbanks, and so was Jerry. And I tried to use his stance, the way Douglas Fairbanks looked in the Black Pirate, with hands on his hips, and this Robin Hood, and the Mark of Zorro, and all of those. They had this marvelous attitude, which Jerry and I agreed.
Well, in writing the script, I had Douglas Fairbanks very much in mind, and the athletic stunts that he did too. So the influence of Douglas Fairbanks was not only in the art, but also in the visual action.
The Duke has carried out his promise and parades his prize before the admiring eyes of the pirates.
I hope you enjoyed that little historical interview of Jerry and Joe. And that concludes the program that we have for today. And it's been really special to speak with you all. But before closing, Mel, do you have anything else to share?
Well, that was amazing. I want to thank all of the participants. I enjoyed everything immensely. They were all different. They were all interesting. And I want to thank you all. And I also want to thank the Combat Anti-Semitism movement for partnering with us. That was wonderful. And I want to thank Arthur. He did a fabulous job. Thank you so much. So maybe next year, another induction ceremony. Thanks, everybody.
Mel, I think you should thank Landon. He was very helpful.
You're not kidding.
Thank you, Mel. And thank you, Landon. And thank you to all of our audience and all of our panelists for joining us today. Thank you so much for joining the special virtual ceremony to honor Jerry and Joe, hosted by the Jewish American Hall of Fame in partnership with the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. Today's program will be available on Facebook and YouTube in the coming days. And you can learn more about the Hall of Fame at amuseum.org and the Combat Anti-Semitism movement at combatantisemitism.org. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like to follow up. Thank you again. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.